It's gonna sound weird for anyone outside of the few of you who follow this channel, but I have a particular soft spot for jank in video games. The biggest reason for this is that the games that come with a shade of jank or are not very likely to be in anyone's Game of the Year list tend to be the games that take the most risks. And also because sometimes good games, even great games, get held back by terrible marketing or bad mismanagement. Agents of Mayhem is a great example of the former. It was supposed to mark a new chapter for Volition after ending the Saints Row series with an over-the-top adventure into hell itself. But the boom of hero shooters and marketing that to this day does nothing to explain what exactly this game is other than it's from the Saints Row devs, it led to bad sales and the studio closing down, before then getting picked up again by a reformed THQ. So, what is Agents of Mayhem? The marketing will have you believe it's a team-based hero shooter, not unlike Overwatch or Paladins, but in reality, it is a squad-based open-world game. Think of the character swap mechanics of Genshin Impact, but with third-person shooter mechanics and no gacha gambling. But is it a good game? That's what we are here to find out, since nobody else really bothered to look at it. In what I think it is a first, at least before Watch Dogs Legion, Agents of Mayhem has you play as the titular agents. All of them. Counting DLC, you get 15 different playable characters that you can mix and match in teams of 3, along with them having their own established teams. The main story has the Mayhem Agency in full conflict against the evil Dr. Babylon from the Legion organization. Their pursuit taking them to Seoul, Korea. From there, you begin waging a constant war against Legion and its multiple lieutenants. Also, continuity-wise, this is a direct sequel to Saints Row GAT, following one of the endings where Johnny Gat chooses to reset the universe into a timeline where the Saints are no law enforcement. And that's more or less the gist of it, at least on a surface level, because as a whole, Mayhem is essentially a Saints Row flavored take on both S.H.I.E.L.D. and G.I. Joe. A combination that is a lot more fun than you will think at first glance. But let's cover the basics. Every agent has their own predetermined loadout, a main weapon, a special attack with a cooldown, and an ultimate. Not too different from a hero shooter, but what makes it different, as I said earlier, is the mix and match formula. Every agent has their own unique abilities and are suited best for different situations. So if for example you get an armored enemy, you can switch to a character that deals extra damage against armor, or if the enemy has an electric shield, you can use someone different to drain it fast. Now, because of those basic needs, you are going to need to follow a specific formula of skills, and even the game will notify you that you need that specific passive ability or class in order to fulfill your mission. Thankfully, there is enough agents with those skills so you can still pick and stay with a main team and not have to worry about the rest. How does this look like when it is time to fight? Well, I'll say Mayhem is rather fitting for both the title and the name of the agency. True to Volition's gameplay style, you get a nice chunk of enemies trying to pelt you with bullets or looking to get you in close quarters combat, so every battle is a fun little game of crowd control and strategizing against the many mini-bosses the game throws at you. At first, it doesn't feel like much since your damage output may not feel like it packs a punch, but when you spend enough time with the enemies, you learn to strategize. You go from regular shooting to using your secondary ability, then swapping characters to keep fighting while the secondary skill cools down. This creates a cycle that lets you build up the Mayhem meter, so in a moment of emergency, you can unleash your ultimate and clear entire rooms. This may sound like the enemies could go from easy pickings to bullet sponges, but trust me, there is actual depth going on, and there is also a sweet spot you can use to make the combat a lot more fun. More on that in a bit. These enemies are not pushover. A careless player can and will get overwhelmed if you are not careful, so to keep you on the move and encourage you to stay on the offensive, enemies drop random pickups, either in the form of health, money, or even a full Mayhem charge. The last one is important to keep an eye out for, because if one of your agents goes down, you have to revive them either with a consumable skill that has a lengthy cooldown, or to pick up the Mayhem charge. Because every time you fill the meter with any character, this instantly revives a character from your team that was fallen, and it can also heal everyone else. Think of it as a mix of the quick health pickups from Doom, or the Sandatsu from Metal Gear Rising. Of course, to make this work, you need to find a sweet spot, because this game has an XP and upgrade system for your agents. Now don't worry, it is not overly grindy, and in a very good twist, the game actually has a custom difficulty setting every time you're about to deploy for your base. From the start I have to point out, there are 15 difficulty levels. 1 to 5 is easy, 6 to 10 is hard, and 11 to 15 is hardcore. The game thankfully will recommend you a difficulty based on the level of your characters, but you can always tweak it to suit your needs. I did mention the different difficulty settings because your characters can go up to level 20, then to level 40 if you have the consumable crystals to do it. And in my first hours of the game, I actually made a mistake of cranking out the difficulty too much. The enemies became very bullet spongy and started one-shotting me without problem. And let me tell you, that was not a fun early experience. But once I found the sweet spot for the difficulty, I was actually having a blast, and the consumables also saved me a lot of headaches. Those can be obtained either by crafting them or by visiting Gremlin at a meeting spot. They're not too remarkable, but they are good to get you out of a bad situation. Now, I know some may be worried that I mentioned leveling and a crafting system, but I will assure you, every element of the crafting and progression systems is just window dressing really. The game gives you the experience like it's candy. If you decide to just pick up a main team and stick with it for the entire game, you will easily get them to max level halfway through the story, if not even getting a few levels past 20 with the collectible crystals that, by the way, the game also gives out like it's nothing. The crafting materials are just a different type of currency, and given how the consumable skills are more of a side grade or a last minute emergency button, you are not going to really starve for materials at all. But those are just the basics of combat and upgrades. Now let's talk about the open world itself. It is going to be a hot take, but in terms of gameplay, this open world is refreshing. See, usually open world games come with a checklist of things to do in order to achieve 100% completion. Some of the activities include messing with enemy patrols or capturing outposts, and once you get all of them, that's the end, which is why most developers give you a lot of them to capture and why you get the copy-paste effect. Mayhem doesn't do this. Instead, anything you capture is only temporary. Capturing territory reduces enemy activity and makes your life easier when moving around. But once the timer runs out, they will recapture what you took from them and the enemy activity resumes. This is great because it means you can strike a balance between wanting to do side activities for the fun of it and simply getting a clear coast to explore or move around the city while doing main missions. It's a good way to keep you engaged even if you finish the game. As for the side activities, you get randomized unlockables whenever you complete one, and since there is no real checklist for those open world activities, you can simply choose to play whichever you want, and have a simply grand old time. Sometimes you won't even realize you're making progress while you play. The other side activity you can do that involves a bit more action, like capturing the outpost, is infiltrating the lairs. There is two ways to access said layers, either finding them hidden around the open world, you do need enemy territory to be active for it, or you get it through the Global Operations passive minigame. The latter is just a way to unlock challenges that give you yet more currency and XP. Any agent you don't plan on using, you can send to complete those operations. That in turn gives you even more scrap, upgrade materials and money, so you are never really running out of options. Occasionally you will detect a lair in the territory and you will have to deploy through it. Now the layers are probably one of the wicked aspects of this game. On the one hand, I cannot confirm or deny this, but it feels like they are procedurally generated. You can re-enter the same lair and every time it will take you through different rooms and objectives. That should be nice in theory, keep each visit fresh and of course have a nice source of fun for you to mess around with the enemies. On the other hand, even with randomization, they all look exactly the same. All of them. So after a while it can get a little old running through them. It doesn't help that it also creates some heavy dissonance between where you are in the story and what is happening in the lair, because every one of those is being controlled by a different Legion commander, who can sometimes talk to you as you complete objectives. Even those you have either arrested or killed. Probably a little overlooked, but it can still be jarring to hear someone you either didn't meet before or who is already dead talking to you just like that. So it's a good thing that despite its simplicity and being one of the smaller cities I've seen in an open world, navigating around Seoul is actually fun. What this city lacks in size, it makes up for it in verticality. Since all of your agents have a double jump, that means there is a fair share of platforming. And since the city is full of skyscrapers, floating platforms and construction zones, it means moving around is really fun. This makes simply running around and grabbing whatever collectibles are on the way all the more interesting. Same with making the combat a lot more vertical. It's too bad I cannot say the same about the driving. It's a bit of a mixed bag. You can commandeer any car you want, but they feel rather stiff to drive. The specialized agent cars you can summon on a lock at will are a lot more fun to use, but getting chased by enemies on car is not. Here's the problem. For some weird reason, Legion cars and your own Mayhem cars are immune to physics when their scripting's taking place. For your car, they will send any civilian car they've bumped into flying until it reaches you. Legion cars, on the other hand, they can do the same to you when you are driving, and the higher your miles level is, the more aggressive Legion cars get, and the easier it is for them to knock you off the road. There are no words to describe just how annoying that is, and I really wish the driving was better, because Volition has some really good cars returning from Saints Row, and I hate that I cannot enjoy them to their full potential. Now, since most of the open world content is not really obligatory or arbitrary, and it does make you for a fun factions warfare sandbox, what other side content is there? You see, the story of Agents of Mayhem is presented as a TV show, with every 3 to 4 main missions representing one of the Legion leaders. So for the side missions, they are like mini episodes involving every other unlockable agent. And while I do enjoy them overall, I'm still a little bit mixed on some of them. On the one hand, like I said, these are great. Since the main story doesn't take into account who you are playing as other than showing you how each agent reacts to the events of the game, it means the individual agent missions let you get to know each agent and see their small story arc leading towards why they all converge into Soul to help fight against Legion. On the other hand, there are individual missions where you exclusively play as that particular agent. The problem with that is the gameplay can be really fun or really dull depending on who you are stuck playing as. Agents with rapid fire or powerful weapons are gonna make their respective command segments fun. But agents who carry shotguns or have a low rate of fire weapons, they're going to feel like a bit of a slog. It sucks because they truly get to shine when you synergize them with the other characters. But having to play them by themselves only highlights their shortcomings and why they are more useful as support rather than for offense. But at the very least their stories are good, for the most part. Remember how I said all 15 agents got their own teams going on? When you complete the personal mission for each agent, you unlock a special mission where you get to do an operation with that particular team. It's a nice way to get you to know these agents even more, and you also get to test them out to see who you'd like to take, or if you'd like to play as the full team. It's a shame most of the climax of those group stories end up, you guessed it, with a lair. But that's enough about the side content, let's talk about the main missions. The main missions are really good. I like them. Each Legion leader got their own themes and their own arsenal to throw at you, and this means you get to both explore Soul, enjoy the vertical levels I was talking about earlier, and you truly get to enjoy the variety of enemies and threats. What makes it fun is that when a big threat is unleashed on you, you feel like you are in a set piece, except you have full control of the situation, and you get to tackle it however you like. Feels really good approaching any of the Legion Doomsday devices, dodging enemies along the way, and all of that while hearing the emergency sirens blasting on the streets, while people scream and flee in terror. And then, when you finally defeat them and you destroy the Doomsday device, you enjoy the spectacle of watching them blow up. I also think this is where the open world elements are at its best. Yes, a lot of the stuff you see during the main story is later implemented as an open world element, but here, they are distributed in a way that it feels like you are going through a proper series of events. There's a better structure and even better pacing to give you an idea of what you can encounter, provided you didn't take over an outpost and wipe out Legion presence. What doesn't become part of the open world, however, are the boss fights. I cannot put enough words into how important it is to have boss fights in games like this. They mark the climax of a story or a chapter. They become a test of the skills you acquired over the course of the story, and most importantly, they give you the satisfaction when you put the villains down after hearing them trash talk you for so long. And since we're on the topic of the villains, we might as well talk about the story. It's good and nice. Like I said, since you got 15 different playable characters, the story never really accounts for who you are playing as. Legion will simply talk about your squad in the general terms, and most of the heavy lifting of the story is also generalized dialogue from the support cast to merge seamlessly with what your characters have to say. And with this story being G.I. Joe Saints Row Edition, there is a fair share of humor. I know at the time of this recording people have been less than happy with the new Saints Row. I guess it's because I have a different taste in humor, aka really bad taste, but I never really had any issue with the writing of these games from Saints Row 3 and onwards. That being said, the jokes that are told in this game, they can be hit or miss. I find some of the better jokes are the ones that are told once and flow along with the story. If you repeat some jokes, I say 3 is the limit, as the best always comes in 3s. Mayhem unfortunately has a problem where some of the jokes not only can be random or out of place, but they also tend to repeat a lot. Just to give you an example, and I'm sure this is gonna turn some people off the game, which is not my intention. There is a planetarium in the game where you do a story mission. And the one joke that keeps repeating, even when you visit that place during the open world, is just the typical Uranus joke. Which sucks because I love that joke, but having it repeated so many times, it just drains the charm of it. It makes it get old. But thankfully those moments are a few and far in between, and I did enjoy the higher moments of humor compared to the low moments of humor. Although I would prefer it if some of the jokes didn't repeat and were tied to the gameplay. One of those low moments was sadly the glitches. I really don't know what was causing this, whether it was playing the game for too long or a memory leak, but I had a few instances during my playthrough where certain things from the game will break. Music will stop playing, menus got stuck and forced me to restart the game. There was even a happy one where an activity that was supposed to reward me with 1 power-up broke and I was suddenly blessed with infinite items. I'm glad this didn't break the game too much or happen often enough to stop my session in its tracks, because otherwise my review here would be a lot less positive. But I am willing to chalk it up to my system being a little bit dated. I am on a 1060 of 6GB after all, and the Series 10 is already getting phased out, so that one's probably on me. But in general terms, Agents of Mayhem is a really good experimental game. It was nice to see the Saints Row developers working on something they felt was more their jam, and even with the jank I would have loved to see them build onto what this game did with a sequel. Because after 2 console generations where many studios had their edgy face of "are we the bodies" writing style, it is refreshing to be an unambiguous force of good. Straightforward storytelling like that is not as common as it used to be. For this and everything else I already mentioned, I am more than happy to give Agents of Mayhem a very solid 8 out of 10. It sucks that it didn't sell well enough and that the dev studio dissolved for a time, because I insist, this is a really good game, one that deserved better and a far more love. I also hope whoever was in charge of the marketing of the game got fired, because they really did a very terrible job that even I hesitated to play this game for the longest time until now. This game has also made me curious to try the new Saints Row in the future. I want to see where this studio is going and how they are evolving, or at least trying to, because by the end, I care more about having fun. It's nice to be critical and it's fair to want to play only the best of the best, but ever since I got over my overly critical, overly edgy phase, I am coming to relearn how to enjoy gaming, and I will dare say, it feels as great as it felt the first time.